When three leather-clad bikers cornered my pregnant wife in our driveway while she carried groceries, I thought it was random road rage, until I spotted our HOA president, Delilah, smirking from across the street like she was watching her favorite Netflix drama. I froze at the kitchen window, coffee cup halfway to my lips, as these wannabe sons of anarchy rejects circled Elena. Gravel crunched under their steel-toed boots like snapping bones, and even through the screen door I caught the sharp reek of motorcycle exhaust. The biggest one, skull bandana, beer gut, pure midlife crisis energy, stepped so close to my 7 months pregnant wife that her grocery bag slipped to the pavement. "Lady, there's going to be consequences for your husband's non-compliance," he growled, clearly reading from some half-baked script. Elena didn't flinch. Didn't cry. She simply picked up her groceries, turned, and walked inside without a word. That's when I knew these idiots had no clue what they'd just stepped into. 12 years working as a military contractor had taught me how to identify threats, gather intel, and eliminate problems efficiently. In 3 minutes, these clowns wouldn't be swaggering at my door, they'd be begging me to make their nightmare stop. Delilah was about to learn the hard way that threatening a soldier's pregnant wife is career suicide. What would you do if bikers threatened your family over lawn violations? Drop your story in the comments. I guarantee every HOA has its own horror tales. But let me rewind. My name is Marcus M. Donovan. I'm 45, a former logistics manager for military contractors in places where saying the wrong thing to the wrong person could get you killed. My wife, Elena, 32, pediatric nurse, tough as nails, is 7 months pregnant with our first child. We moved into Willowbrook Estates 6 months ago, paying $485,000 for a corner lot house big enough for a growing family. On the surface, the neighborhood looked like a suburban paradise. Manicured lawns, matching mailboxes, and neighbors dutifully bagging up dog poop. But beneath that shiny veneer, everything was ruled like a petty dictatorship by one woman, Delilah Hartwell. She's 52, 6-time unopposed HOA president, and a real estate agent who profits from protecting property values. Translation: anything that doesn't fit her idea of suburban perfection gets crushed. Not coincidentally, she also owns the biggest house here, 2.3 acres, worth $750,000. Small-town tyrants don't leave things like that to chance. Our first clash seemed minor. While most neighbors planted thirsty, high-maintenance lawns, I went with drought-resistant native landscaping. Better for the environment, county-approved, and water-saving. 2 days after the last shrub went in, Delilah showed up at my door waving a violation notice, unapproved landscaping materials. I'd done my homework. 3 days of HOA bylaws, county ordinances, and state conservation rules confirmed my yard wasn't just legal. It was exactly what environmental experts encouraged. So I filed a formal appeal, complete with county water authority documentation and environmental studies. That's when the harassment began. Violation notices landed weekly, fence too high, mailbox non-compliant, trees pruned incorrectly. All bogus. Meanwhile, Delilah's friends had identical violations she completely ignored. Martha Kowalski, the sweet 70-year-old widow 3 houses down, $8,000 in fines for a garden gnome. Trevor and Sage, the young tech couple with solar panels, constant harassment over unsightly equipment that actually raised their property value. The air around our house became a metaphor, the fresh, earthy scent of mulch from my native plants clashing with the mechanical hiss of sprinklers on traditional lawns. I installed security cameras after Elena noticed slow-circling cars, and sure enough, caught HOA board members photographing our property like we were running a cartel. Elena begged me to just plant grass and keep the peace. But I've dealt with bullies before. Backing down only makes them hungrier. This fight wasn't just about us, it was about every neighbor steamrolled by clipboard tyrants. The notices kept coming: cheap copy paper, cheap threats, fines, liens, legal action. But Delilah made one critical mistake: she assumed I'd fold like her past victims. Lady clearly never dealt with someone who'd run supply chains in combat zones. 3 weeks after my appeal, she staged her power play. An emergency HOA board meeting about my dangerous non-compliance threatening community standards. Theatrics were her specialty. She scheduled it for a Tuesday at 2 p.m., right during Elena's hospital shift and my physical therapy for an old shoulder injury. Coincidence? About as likely as Delilah developing a conscience. She stacked the board with her cronies. Bryce, a retired VP who thinks HOA meetings are Goldman Sachs briefings, and Moran, a country club treasurer whose main skill is nodding. With 4 residents present, 3 of them loyalists, they passed a motion for an immediate $2,500 fine plus $50 daily until I tore out my landscaping. The whole meeting lasted 12 minutes. I know because I timed it later on my security footage. But here's what Delilah hadn't counted on. I'd actually read the HOA governing documents. Every word of the 87-page legal slog no one else bothered to study. And from my contractor days, I knew one golden rule of documents: hierarchy matters. CC and RS outrank everything. Most people don't realize HOA documents work in a hierarchy. CC and RS at the top, then bylaws, then rules and regulations. Any amendment that contradicts a higher-level document is automatically invalid. That little legal loophole has saved countless homeowners thousands in bogus fines. Buried in Section 4.3.2 was my golden ticket, a clause requiring 72 hours notice for emergency meetings. Delilah only gave us 48. She'd just handed me a legal sledgehammer to smash her entire stunt. That night, I built a challenge that would have made a federal prosecutor nod in approval. I documented every violation, cited statutes, and delivered enough certified copies to wallpaper Delilah's McMansion. Result? The meeting was invalid, the vote meaningless, and their $2,500 fine had as much legal weight as monopoly money. But I wasn't done. I dug deeper into the governing documents and struck gold. Turns out, Delilah had amended the bylaws twice in the last 18 months without homeowner approval. The original bylaws required full membership approval for any fine over $100. Translation: every penalty sheet issued in the last year and a half was worthless. That's where my military training kicked in. In logistics, you don't just fix the immediate fire, you dismantle the system that caused it. So, I sent certified letters to all 127 homeowners detailing exactly how Delilah had been breaking the law. I included copies of the illegal amendments, highlighted violations, and even offered free help to anyone who'd been overcharged. The floodgates opened. Within 48 hours, 23 families reached out. Martha with her infamous $8,000 garden gnome crime. Trevor and Sage with the solar panels Delilah hated. Dorothy, a retired teacher, fined $600 for painting her front door the wrong shade of blue, despite the official color chart listing 17 approved blues, including hers. Soon, the crunch of gravel in my driveway became constant as neighbors came by to share their stories. Each more absurd than the last, each fine more blatantly illegal. My kitchen became command central, the smell of fresh coffee mixing with rustling paperwork as we built the case. By week's end, I had enough evidence to bury Delilah's entire operation. But bullies don't back down, they double down. When she realized how many residents were pushing back, Delilah panicked. She threatened liens on multiple properties and even talked about contacting mortgage companies, claiming widespread violations were hurting neighborhood values. Classic power move: when you're losing control, threaten nuclear war. My counterpunch was precise. I organized homeowners into a formal coalition, secured shared legal representation, and began preparing a class action challenge against 18 months of illegal fines. Game on. Delilah's retaliation came fast and petty. Within a week, she hired executive protection services. Sounds tough, right? In reality, it was 2 guys in polos driving a white Ford Explorer with magnetic decals. Their job? Patrol the neighborhood, especially my house, because apparently drought-resistant landscaping was a clear and present danger to suburban America. Every morning at 7 a.m., they parked across from my driveway, taking notes like wannabe spies. One even issued me a trespassing warning for walking on the public sidewalk that borders the common area. Yes, they literally tried to ban me from my own neighborhood's walkways. But here's where Delilah made her tactical blunder. I recognized one of the guards. Big guy, buzz cut, unmistakable military bearing. His name was Jimmy. 2 tours in Afghanistan before switching to private security. Once he found out I was ex-military too, he started talking. Turns out executive protection was owned by Delilah's brother-in-law, Russell Hartwell. Their contract specifically included making certain residents uncomfortable enough to consider relocation. Jimmy even showed me photos on his phone, Martha being harassed about her gnome, Trevor and Sage stalked over their solar panels, and Elena, my pregnant wife, being followed to her car. That metallic taste of rage filled my mouth as I watched footage of those clowns tailing Elena. But anger without strategy is wasted energy. I didn't need revenge. I needed leverage. So I launched my own surveillance op. I documented every law they broke, operating outside their licensed jurisdiction, harassing residents without cause, failing to wear ID badges. By my count, they'd already racked up violations of at least a dozen state laws governing private security. Jimmy slipped another gem. Executive Protection had subcontracted serious intimidation to a local motorcycle club, the Ironwood Riders. Not real bikers, just weekend posers led by Delilah's nephew Randy, a 28-year-old with a fraud conviction who still lived in his mom's basement. Their loud pipes became the neighborhood's new alarm clock. Meanwhile, I was building something Delilah never expected, a coalition. It started small, meetings at Murphy's Diner downtown, the kind of place where the coffee is strong and the booths sag with age. First meeting, 7 residents. Second, 18. By the 4th week, 47 crammed into the diner, swapping horror stories and brainstorming strategy. That's where I met Phyllis Brennan. Retired attorney, 72, sharp as a tack with silver hair and a courtroom presence that could make a jury sit straighter. Forced into retirement by her firm, she'd been itching for a fight. She offered to take on our legal work pro bono, not just out of boredom, but because she hated bullies. We also gained Diego Ramirez, a former city councilman who knew which officials to call about HOA violations. His real weapon? Connections to local media and a deep knowledge of municipal politics. The pieces were falling into place. While we were building our coalition, Delilah was busy escalating. She filed bogus noise complaints with the city about my lawnmower, even though I only used it on Saturday mornings, well within legal hours. She tried to shut down my home-based consulting business for zoning violations, despite the fact I met with clients maybe twice a month and generated less traffic than the weekly bridge club. She was throwing everything she had, hoping something would stick. But every desperate move just gave me more ammunition. I filed a formal complaint with the State HOA Oversight Board, backed with evidence of illegal amendments, selective enforcement, and financial irregularities stretching across her entire 6-year reign. Then came the moment that changed everything. Reviewing my security footage one night, I saw Delilah meeting her nephew Randy behind the community center at 11 p.m. The audio from my directional MIC was crystal clear. "Whatever it takes to get them out," she hissed, sliding him an envelope thick with cash. "I don't care what you have to do, but that family needs to understand they're not welcome here." Randy nodded, pocketing the envelope. "Don't worry, Aunt Del. We'll make sure they get the message loud and clear." I had her. Conspiracy. Premeditated harassment. Dead to rights. But instead of celebrating, my shoulders tightened with that old pre-combat tension. This wasn't about HOA violations anymore. Delilah had just declared war on my family, and I was about to show her what a real war looked like. The attack came on a Thursday morning, while I was at physical therapy for my shoulder. Elena had just finished loading groceries, organic vegetables, prenatal vitamins, the supplies of a nurse preparing for motherhood. She hummed softly to herself, one hand resting on her 7-month belly. That's when 3 Harleys rolled into our driveway like they owned the place. Randy and his biker wannabe buddies, all skull bandanas and leather vests, formed a circle around her in some choreographed display of intimidation. The lead guy, Jake, prison tattoos, beer-stale breath, stepped so close Elena instinctively backed into her car. Your husband's causing problems for this community," Randy read stiffly, clearly from a script Delilah had fed him. "There's going to be consequences for non-compliance with property regulations. Serious consequences." Here's the thing about Elena, 7 months pregnant, facing 3 bikers, and she stays ice cold. No tears. No begging. No fear for them to feed on. She simply nodded, picked up her scattered groceries, and walked into the house with the dignity of a queen dismissing clowns. The moment the door shut, she called me. "Honey, I think our HOA problem just got a lot more serious. I was in my truck within 30 seconds, tearing down back roads like a man possessed. Adrenaline tasted like copper in my mouth. But by the time I pulled into the driveway, the bikers were gone. Elena was rattled but safe, already writing down everything she could remember. Smart woman. Documentation is power. That's when my logistics training kicked into high gear. 3 phone calls. That's all it took. First call, my buddy Marcus at State Patrol. He ran the bikers' plates. Second call, a contact at the DA's office who specialized in organized intimidation. Third call, a private investigator who owed me from the contractor days. The intel came back fast, and it was beautiful. Randy, outstanding warrant for unpaid child support. Jake, violating parole by associating with known felons. The third guy, Tommy, skipped his court-ordered anger management. All 3 had nooses around their necks, and I just handed the rope to the right people. At 3:17 p.m., my phone rang. Randy's girlfriend, sobbing from the county lockup. Please, she begged. Whatever you did, just make it stop. He's got kids to support. 20 minutes later, Jake and Tommy showed up on my porch, not swaggering this time, but shuffling like men headed to confession. No Harleys, no attitude, just hands in pockets and eyes glued to the floor. Look, man, Jake stammered. We just want to apologize. This whole thing got out of hand. A wise girl said you might be willing to help if we cooperated. I let them sweat for a full minute before stepping aside. Come in. We need to talk. What they told me would have made a prosecutor weep with joy. Delilah had paid them $500 cash to send a message to my family. She specifically ordered them to confront Elena while I wasn't home, to terrorize a pregnant woman into convincing her husband to fold. Premeditated harassment. Conspiracy. A paper trail thicker than Randy's rap sheet. Both men agreed to give sworn statements in exchange for my word I'd speak to the DA about their cooperation. I recorded everything, documented their willingness, and in one afternoon, gathered enough evidence to nuke Delilah's little empire. But the best part? Word of Randy's arrest spread through the neighborhood faster than church gossip. For the first time, neighbors who'd suffered silently under Delilah started whispering about resistance. The smell of rebellion mixed with barbecue smoke as groups gathered in driveways, talking about finally standing up to the tyrant. Delilah's empire was cracking, and she knew it. That evening, I caught her peeking through her curtains, probably wondering how her foolproof intimidation plan had backfired so catastrophically. 3 minutes. That's all it took to turn her nuclear option into her worst disaster yet. But me. I wasn't close to finished with Delilah Hartwell. Not by a long shot. While Delilah was busy trying to scare my family with bargain bin bikers, I did what military contractors do best, dug through the paper trail until I found the smoking gun. It started with a simple Freedom of Information Act request to the City Planning Department. Boring, right? Not this time. Buried in those dusty municipal files was evidence that made Delilah's embezzlement look like pocket change. The original 2018 development agreement for Willowbrook Estates required that 15% of the 85 homes, at least 12 units, be reserved for moderate-income families. Teachers, nurses, firefighters, everyday people who keep communities alive. How many affordable homes did Delilah's company actually build? 0. Not a single one under $400,000. Instead, she told the city council that market conditions made affordable housing impossible, promising to pay $600,000 in lieu fees over 5 years. Except she never paid a dime. For 3 years the city sent notices, and Delilah ignored them like unpaid parking tickets. And that was just the beginning. I traced HOA administrative fees through 6 years of records. $340,000 funneled into Hartwell Property Solutions, a shell company Delilah secretly owned. The budget had set aside $50,000 a year for legitimate management. She charged nearly $60,000 for phantom services. Landscaping never done. Security contracts that broke competitive bidding laws. Consulting fees more bloated than a Fortune 500 exec's bonus. Martha, our coalition's volunteer bookkeeper, spread the records across my dining room table like a crime scene analyst. The smell of coffee mixed with the sound of rustling paper as she pointed out fraud after fraud. "Look here," she said, tapping one line. $4,500 billed for emergency tree removal in January 2023. But she'd documented the storm damage that month herself. Not a single tree was removed. The scope of Delilah's corruption was breathtaking. 6 years of looting our neighborhood while threatening anyone who questioned her. But here's the irony. Her desperate grip on control was speeding up her downfall. If the city revoked our incorporation for violating the housing deal, property values could drop 20 to 30% overnight. Her real estate empire would collapse, and she faced non-profit fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty, crimes that carried prison time and asset forfeiture. That night Elena found me staring at the evidence, bank statement in hand. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, sitting with her tea. "Not a ghost," I replied, holding up the transfer from HOA funds into Delilah's personal account. "I found our nuclear weapon." The power had shifted. Delilah thought she was clinging to authority, but she was really fighting to stay out of prison. Every move she made dug her grave deeper. But I didn't want to just crush her. The community deserved to see the truth, to understand how they'd been robbed, and to rebuild from the ashes of her corruption. Justice served cold is sweeter than revenge served hot. So I planned the most satisfying HOA meeting in history. My dining room table became mission control, stacked with enough evidence to convict a Fortune 500 company. For 2 weeks, every night was a war room session. Phyllis Brennan arrived first, her leather briefcase full of documents sharp enough to make prosecutors weep. At 72, she moved with the precision of a surgeon and the grit of someone who'd fought bullies for 4 decades. "I've been practicing law since Nixon was president," she said, lining up files. "Never seen fraud this brazen in a neighborhood." Diego Ramirez brought political savvy and media connections money couldn't buy. Former councilman, current activist, he read municipal documents like a pianist reading sheet music, spotting legal precedents to make our case ironclad. Martha, once just a sweet neighbor, transformed into a forensic accountant. Glasses perched on her nose, calculator in hand, she traced fraudulent transactions with the patience of someone who'd balanced church budgets for 30 years. The scratch of her pencil was our nightly soundtrack. Trevor and Sage, our solar panel tech couple, handled the digital side. They built a secure evidence database, cross-referenced timelines, and crafted a presentation sleek enough for a corporate boardroom. The master plan rolled out like a military campaign. Phase 1. Hire a CPA specializing in non-profit fraud. $2,000 split among members, worth every penny. Phase 2. File simultaneous complaints with city, state, and federal agencies, timed so Delilah couldn't destroy evidence. Phase 3. Hold a community meeting with full transparency and undeniable proof. Phase 4. Elect new HOA leadership with constitutional safeguards against corruption. Phyllis mailed the whistleblower complaint to the state attorney general on Tuesday morning, followed by IRS documentation for tax violations. My kitchen smelled of certified mail and ink as we assembled packages for multiple agencies. "We're not just seeking justice," Phyllis said while sealing an envelope. "We're building a paper trail so this never happens again." Martha's investigation revealed horrors even we hadn't imagined. Hartwell's fake invoices. Maintenance projects that existed only on paper. Delilah's luxury car lease, country club membership, even a Hawaii vacation disguised as a property management conference. Total estimated theft over 6 years. Martha announced one late-night session, $480,000. That's nearly $6,000 per household that should have gone to community improvements. Diego coordinated with local media, shaping a rollout strategy that would control the narrative. "Timing is everything," he reminded us, scrolling through his contact list. "We get one shot. Miss the window, and Delilah controls the damage." My role was clear: military logistics and psychological warfare. I built detailed timelines with contingencies for every possible countermeasure Delilah might attempt. Evidence backups in multiple secure locations, encrypted communication protocols, and, most importantly, psychological pressure to keep her from bolting before justice hit. Our arsenal was devastating, 847 pages of financial records proving embezzlement, video and audio of illegal meetings and intimidation, witness statements from 73 homeowners, and expert analysis from our forensic accountant. Meanwhile, Delilah's counterintelligence was laughable. She sent her friend Morin to infiltrate our coffee shop meetings, unaware we'd spotted her immediately and fed her a steady stream of false leads about petty bylaw disputes. Delilah believed we were pursuing minor procedural complaints, never realizing a federal case was quietly tightening around her. The waiting tested patience. Elena, 8 months pregnant, became our anchor. "Remember why we're doing this," she'd say when tempers flared. "Not revenge." So our daughter grows up in a community built on honesty and respect. And the evidence kept piling up: bank records of shady transfers, emails linking Delilah to shell companies, testimonials from contractors forced to inflate invoices and kick back payments. Within 2 weeks, we had enough firepower to end 3 political careers and put someone behind bars for a decade. The anticipation was metallic and sharp, like the breath before a military strike. It was time to show Delilah what happens when you threaten a soldier's family. Her paranoia spiked as rumors spread. Cornered, she made her boldest move yet: an emergency special assessment demanding $5,000 from every household for what she called urgent legal defense against frivolous litigation. The notice hit mailboxes on Friday for a Monday meeting. Classic Delilah: minimal notice, maximum pressure. She was betting apathy would hand her victory. Her pitch dripped manipulation. According to her, radical elements threatened the community with lawsuits that could tank property values. The $5,000 levy would build a war chest of elite attorneys and investigators to defend our way of life. The implied threat was obvious: pay up or watch your home lose value. For many families already strained by inflation, $5,000 might as well have been $50,000. She was gambling on fear. I let her. Every misstep, every illegal maneuver, every desperate lie went straight into the file. My cameras even caught her Sunday meeting with Bryson Marine, where she openly discussed funneling HOA funds into her personal legal defense, a federal crime that would add years to her sentence. Monday night's meeting broke records. 89 residents showed, the largest turnout ever. Delilah took the floor, her usual poise replaced by manic energy and darting eyes. The stale coffee and sweat in the air carried her desperation. "We face coordinated attacks from agitators determined to destroy our community," she cried, pointing at me and Elena. "These people moved here 6 months ago and immediately began filing complaints and lawsuits meant to bankrupt us." The lies came fast. Mac was a chronic troublemaker, the native landscaping was a pest hazard, and our coalition was an illegal conspiracy. Then Martha Kowalski rose. 70 years old, silver hair, church lady cardigan, her voice cut through like a gavel. "Before any vote on assessments, I formally request a full financial audit of the last 5 years." Silence. Delilah blanched as Martha pressed on. "Independent verification of all administrative fees, vendor contracts involving board members, and any emergency expenditures beyond budget." The room shifted. Residents who had never questioned finances suddenly leaned forward. Delilah muttered something about trusting leadership, but the spell had broken. The vote failed spectacularly: 102 against, 3 in favor, herself and her 2 cronies. As neighbors filed out, I overheard them whispering the questions we had waited months to hear: where has our money really been going? Delilah's response was pure spite. Over the next week, she unleashed a campaign of harassment that would have impressed a dictator. Bogus code complaints, fabricated zoning violations against my business, false safety reports to shut down the playground. She even spread rumors I was under federal investigation, hoping to isolate me. But her biggest mistake came when she hired a licensed PI to dig up dirt on my service record and finances. Expecting scandals, the investigator instead found a spotless record and legitimate success. Worse for her, he accidentally uncovered her hidden bank accounts, shell company dealings, and a trail of corruption stretching back to her last community. Bound by ethics, he withdrew, preserved the evidence, and personally called me to apologize, urging me to take it straight to the district attorney. The irony was exquisite. Delilah had paid someone to dig into my life, only to gift prosecutors more ammunition against herself. Every move she made tightened her noose. Meanwhile, Community unity surged. Yards sprouted "We support transparency" signs. The neighborhood watch transformed into support networks for families she targeted. Her empire was crumbling. A GoFundMe campaign raised $12,000 in just 48 hours to cover legal expenses. The pressure cooker was ready to blow, and I held the trigger. Time for the final act. Delilah's last gambit was as desperate as it was predictable. 3 days before our scheduled community presentation, she filed a restraining order claiming I'd threatened her safety using harassment and intimidation tactics I'd allegedly learned in the military. The same woman who had once sent bikers to terrorize my pregnant wife was now painting herself as the victim with an Academy Award-worthy performance. Her evidence included doctored audio recordings of me making threats, fabricated witness statements from neighbors who barely knew me, and a tearful declaration about feeling hunted by a trained killer. The melodrama was so over the top that even her attorney looked embarrassed filing the paperwork. But I'd anticipated this move and was ready. My home security system had recorded every interaction between us, providing crystal-clear evidence that dismantled her timeline. A forensic audio expert, the same one who helped with our financial investigation, proved her recordings were spliced and manipulated. Amateur digital cut-and-paste jobs that wouldn't fool a high school tech class. At the restraining order hearing, Delilah's case collapsed instantly. Her attorney withdrew the petition after reviewing my counter-evidence, and the judge bluntly suggested she might want to consult with a criminal defense lawyer about filing false police reports. Watching her storm out of court, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Her next move was the media. Delilah called Channel 7 News with a sob story about a group of veterans intimidating an elderly woman, complete with crocodile tears and melodramatic claims of fearing for her life. The reporter initially showed sympathy, until I handed over the full evidence file we'd built. 24 hours later, Channel 7 called back, not to interview Delilah about harassment, but to dig into HOA corruption and financial fraud. Her victim narrative had backfired into a PR disaster. Meanwhile, our coalition accelerated. When Delilah tried to cancel the school auditorium by claiming security threats, we simply moved the presentation to Sacred Heart Church's Fellowship Hall. Within hours, we had a larger venue, expanded seating, and invites sent to city council members, reporters, and law enforcement. The night before the event, Delilah's last ally cracked. Bryce, the retired bank VP who had rubber-stamped years of financial irregularities, showed up at my door looking like a man staring at his own obituary. His hands trembled as he handed me a bulging manila envelope. "She threatened my grandkids," he whispered, eyes darting around. "Said if I didn't stay quiet, she'd ruin my family with my bankruptcy history. I can't do this anymore." The documents inside were devastating. Bank records showing direct HOA to personal transfers, email chains plotting how to hide irregularities, and even recordings of Delilah openly boasting about intimidating board members. But the most crushing piece was a signed confession Bryce had prepared, 3 years of fraud and intimidation in his own words. He agreed to testify and provide sworn statements to federal investigators. From there, the walls closed in fast. The Attorney General's office confirmed an active probe into HOA financial crimes. The IRS opened audits into 6 years of filings. City attorneys reviewed development agreement violations worth millions in penalties. Even the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit took interest in possible mail fraud charges tied to falsified documents. And then came Elena's decision. Just days from her due date, she insisted on attending the presentation. "This is about our daughter's future," she said, calmly packing a hospital bag as a precaution. "She deserves to grow up in a community built on honesty." That night, I felt strangely calm. Weeks of preparation and evidence gathering had carried us to this moment, and instead of anxiety, I felt relief. Justice was finally in reach. Meanwhile, Delilah locked herself in her McMansion, screaming at someone on the phone while neighbors reported she was drinking heavily. Her lawyer had already dropped her. She was alone. The Sacred Heart Fellowship Hall hadn't seen a crowd like this since the Christmas pageant. Over 300 residents packed inside, filling every chair and wall space, while overflow seating carried the audio next door. City Councilwoman Patricia Williams sat front row, pen ready. Detective Martinez from the Financial Crimes Unit stood by the exit, badge visible. Channel 7 set up full studio lights. And in the back corner sat Delilah, alone, aged, stripped of her entourage. On stage beside me, Elena radiated quiet strength, her pregnancy reminding everyone why this mattered. It wasn't about money or property values. It was about the kind of community we wanted for our children. I stepped up to the podium and let my eyes sweep the packed hall. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, voice steady. "Tonight, you're going to learn where your HOA fees have really been going for the past 6 years." The first slide hit the screen like a bomb, budgeted versus actual administrative expenses, showing systematic inflation that bled nearly $500,000. The gasp that followed from 300 people was like air being sucked out of the room. $480,000, I continued, letting the number hang heavy. That's about $6,000 per household. Money that should have gone to maintenance, improvements, and reserve funds, instead funneled to shell companies owned by one person. The avalanche of evidence had just begun. Fake vendor invoices for projects never completed. Personal shopping trips disguised as community expenses. Bank records showing direct transfers from HOA funds into private accounts. Each revelation drew louder gasps and mutters from the crowd, the energy in the hall building into something that felt like a small revolution. But the final blow came with the audio recording, Delilah's voice, crystal clear, directing her nephew to intimidate my family, whatever it takes to get them out. The reaction was instant. 300 pairs of eyes turned on Delilah as if she had just confessed to murder in church. Someone in the back shouted, "Shame!" and within seconds the chant spread, the entire room thundering with condemnation. That's when Delilah broke. She leapt to her feet, her face red with rage, fingers stabbing the air toward me like I was the devil himself. "This is all lies," she screamed, straining over the roar. "This man is a dangerous military radical trying to destroy our community. You're all too stupid to understand complex financial management." The insult hung over the hall like toxic smoke, calling your own neighbors stupid while being caught stealing their money. Even Shakespeare couldn't have written a more dramatic downfall. Then Martha Kowalski stood, her steady church lady voice slicing through the chaos. "Delilah, dear, I've been doing community bookkeeping since before you were born. These aren't complex finances. This is simple theft." The room erupted in applause, wave after wave for nearly 2 full minutes. And when the clapping finally faded, witness after witness stepped forward. Martha revealed she had been pressured for years to hide discrepancies. Bryce confessed he'd been threatened for questioning suspicious transfers. Associates of RY testified via video about being paid to intimidate families. 23 homeowners shared stories of bogus fines, selective enforcement, and harassment designed to silence dissent. Piece by piece, the avalanche of testimony buried Delilah's credibility beyond recovery. But the breaking point came when Detective Martinez rose. His voice carried the weight of law itself. "Ms. Hartwell, based on the evidence presented here tonight and ongoing investigations, you are under arrest for filing false police reports, conspiracy to commit harassment, and fraud." The metallic snap of handcuffs closing around her wrists was the sweetest sound I'd heard in months. As she was led away, still shrieking about witch hunts and persecution, the entire hall stood, not in cruelty, but in sheer relief. A community finally free from tyranny. Channel 7's reporter went live in the parking lot, residents lining up to share their stories. "This is what grassroots justice looks like," she declared into the camera. "Ordinary people standing together against corruption, and winning." The emergency vote was unanimous. Dissolve the existing HOA board, elect interim leadership, enforce strict financial oversight, and commit to total transparency going forward. The old system died that night, replaced by something democratic instead of dictatorial. As we filed out of the fellowship hall, Elena squeezed my hand and smiled wearily. Think she finally got the message? I glanced at the empty chair Delilah had occupied, then at neighbors talking excitedly about rebuilding their community the right way. "Loud and clear, sweetheart," I said. "Loud and clear." 6 months later, I'm pushing my 8-week-old daughter, Hope, through what used to be Delilah Hartwell's backyard, now transformed into a breathtaking memorial garden. The scent of native wildflowers drifts through the air as volunteers plant the very drought-resistant species that sparked this war in the first place. The foreclosed McMansion looming behind us has become the Willowbrook Community Center, its windows glowing with life and light. The legal reckoning that followed was pure poetry. Federal Judge Patricia Casey sentenced Delilah to 8 years in minimum security prison, declaring, "Financial fraud against one's own neighbors represents a particularly egregious breach of trust. Full restitution, $680,000, plus interest and penalties that would keep her broke until her 70s. Randy, her wannabe biker nephew, got 18 months and 3 years of mandatory community service teaching motorcycle safety to teens. Facing real consequences somehow revealed a hidden talent for reaching kids who might have followed him into the same dead-end rebellion. The house where Delilah once ruled like a suburban dictator sold at auction for $420,000. Our newly elected board snapped it up using recovered funds, money that should have gone to community improvements years ago. Every stolen penny was returned, interest calculated down to the last cent thanks to Martha's meticulous bookkeeping. And here's the best part. Property values in Willowbrook rose by 12%. Not because of authoritarian crackdowns, but because young families flocked here for our transparency and community-first culture. Word spreads fast when neighbors support one another instead of living in fear. My consulting business skyrocketed after Channel 7's follow-up stories went viral. HOAs from Arizona to Florida call me for help fighting their own corruption. Elena teases me as the HOA whisperer, though I prefer to think of myself as someone who arms ordinary people with the tools to beat bullies at their own game. The ripple effect amazed even me. State Senator Margaret Torres sponsored the HOA Reform Act after hearing our story, mandating annual audits and financial transparency statewide. It passed unanimously, uncovering corruption in 47 more communities within the first year. Sometimes one victory sparks dozens more. Closer to home, the Willowbrook Scholarship Program, funded entirely with recovered theft money, awarded its first 5 grants last month. $12,000 each, given to local students pursuing careers in education, healthcare, and public service. Martha chaired the selection committee, glowing with pride as she transformed Delilah's greed into opportunity for others. Now, our annual community festival, held on the very ground where Delilah once schemed, celebrates everything she tried to destroy. Barbecue sizzles, kids laugh, families gather for music and dancing in the place where corruption once festered. Hope's first birthday will be celebrated here, surrounded by neighbors who actually know and care about each other. But the greatest change can't be measured in court rulings or dollar signs. Our streets feel lighter, warmer, alive with trust. Children play freely without their parents fearing violation notices. Neighbors chat over fences instead of sniping through complaint letters. The native garden that started this war has become a neighborhood showpiece, copied house by house. Just this morning, the phone rang, another desperate homeowner in Phoenix describing the same familiar pattern. Selective enforcement, missing funds, intimidation campaigns. "Can you help us?" she asked, her voice shaking with the same desperation I once heard in Willowbrook. Elena looked up from feeding Hope, nodded, and smiled before I even answered. "Yes, I told her. We absolutely can. Because here's the truth, fighting Delilah taught me something profound. One person with evidence and allies can topple even the most corrupt system, if they have the courage to stand up. Bullies rely on silence. They count on decent people paying unfair fees and swallowing abuse just to avoid conflict. So now it's your turn. Drop your HOA horror stories in the comments. I read every one. Together, we'll chart your path to justice. Whether it's financial fraud, harassment, or power-hungry board members, there's always a solution hidden in the fine print of those governing documents.